online at bbc.co.uk/5live. This is the Germany 2006 station. Every game live
on 5 Live.
This Friday, the country will remember the first anniversary of the London bombings. We've heard many stories about the rescue work the emergency services carried out that day, but what is less well known is that alongside them were volunteer ministers from Scientology. This morning, the 5 Live report goes undercover to investigate how, from the London bombings to Ground Zero, volunteer ministers from Scientology travel the world, providing what they claim is effective help in times of peril.
Did they do anything like that after the London bombings?
Yes.
We all went help. We were all there.
You were all there?
Oh, yeah.
You went, whereabouts did you go? Were you...
We were all the Russell Square. We were part of the emergency and we've helped.
We also reveal how the world's biggest single terrorist attack became an opportunity for one big recruitment drive.
So at Ground Zero then, they wanted to keep psychiatrists or other forms of counseling out of the activities there.
And how conventional psychiatrists are under fire from the Scientologist.
If you start off in an organisation which begins with a science fiction novel as the basis for its beliefs of the world and the universe, and from that point of view is proposing to criticise, say, the way in which we understand the schizophrenias in 2006, I'm afraid I'm not going to take part in the conversation.
Well, investigating this for the 5 Live report were Elodie Harper and Naomi McMullen, and Elodie joins me this morning. Morning, Elodie. We've all heard of Scientology. Just remind us what it is.
Well, firstly, although it's often called a church, officially it actually isn't, or certainly not in this country, as the Charities Commission denied it that right in 1999 as it failed to promote, in their words, moral or spiritual welfare. It is recognised as a religion in some other countries, though, including the USA, where, as we know, it has a very high-profile following. Its belief system is based on the writings of L. Ron Hubbard, and particularly his book from 1950, which is called Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. You
went undercover to a meeting of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Now, what exactly is that?
Well, we went to 3 meetings of the CCHR, or Citizens Commission of Human Rights, which is a wing of Scientology dedicated to fighting psychiatry, which it says is the reason why our society is failing. The meetings were led by Paul Fletcher, who's the director of CCHR's London branch, and Stefania Sisko, a director of special affairs for Scientology. And watching over us while we met was an imposing 6-foot-high portrait of L. Ron Hubbard, which dominated the meeting room, along with rows and rows of his books. And much of the meetings were spent watching videos which set out Scientology's views on psychiatry and why they believe it's harmful to us.
Right, so how is this linked to their work on the 7th of July last year?
Well, CCHR believes that mental illnesses, including post-traumatic stress disorder, don't actually exist, but are just a fraud invented by psychiatrists as part of a plan to gain social control. And they also believe psychiatrists, or psychs as they call them, are so dangerous that Scientology actually has a duty to protect the public from them in times of crisis. And we discovered that was exactly what they tried to do on the streets of London on the day of the bombings almost 12 months ago.
I was reading on the CCHR website how, CCHR went out after 9/11.
Right, yeah.
You know, go to the site and say, look, you don't have to go to a psychiatrist.
That was a volunteer minister.
That was volunteer minister. Did they do anything like that after the London bombings?
Yes.
Or...
Yes. Oh, yeah.
We had a yellow van which was going
We all
around
went
to help.
We were all there.
You were all there?
Oh, yeah.
You went, whereabouts did you go? Were you...
We were all the Russell Square. We were
Russell.
part of the emergency and we've helped quite a lot of
And do you remember the Reading train disaster?
Mm-hmm.
We went there too.
We were there.
I was there too.
And what kind of help and support did you offer?
Well, we just offer whatever they need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they need to assist, these locationals, or they just want people help with the cleaning up.
Because people are distressed. So, you know, you want and you opportunity for psychs when they are distressed. Okay, you need counseling. You go in, that's it. We try to keep them away. Spiritual.
Spiritual security.
Spiritual security.
Fighting the psychiatrists, keeping the psychs away.
Do you think you got through to people?
On 7/7.
Yeah.
What you just heard there was Paul Fletcher telling us that he and other Scientologists were keeping the psychs away when they went to help trauma victims amongst all the chaos of the day. And Stefania jokingly refers to it as a type of spiritual security needed to save people from the threat of receiving psychological counselling.
But Paul Fletcher did say, didn't he, that the Scientologists on the ground, the volunteer ministers, helped out by offering cups of tea to the rescue workers, and that clearly is a valuable role.
Yes, it is, absolutely. But he does also refer to practising what are called touch assists and locationals on trauma victims. Now, in particular, touch assists involve touching the person in order to put them in contact with the place of their physical or psychological injury. And these techniques are a form of faith healing based on Scientology's teachings about how the human mind works.
Clearly, this is a difficult time, the week ahead, for the survivors and families of the London bombings. Has there been any reaction from them?
Yes, there has. We spoke to one survivor of the 7/7 bombings who has some mental health training and was also approached by Scientologists after the disaster. They didn't want to be identified, but they did tell us how they were shocked that they and fellow survivors were targeted by Scientologists trying to recruit them and talking of Dianetics therapy as if it were a medically recognised form of therapy.
Right, well, let's broaden the conversation, because it's not just at 7/7, is it, that Scientologists have been seeking out trauma victims?
No, it isn't, not at all. I mean, in the days after the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001, the National Mental Health Association in America warned people, in their words, to beware of Scientologists claiming to be mental health experts after they flooded the disaster zone with their volunteer ministers, who are the sort of worker ants of the organisation. So volunteers raced down to the Twin Towers from their Fifth Avenue headquarters and from across the USA in the hours after the Twin Towers were hit. We spoke to the NMHA, who did confirm this to us, and we also spoke to Bruce Hines, who is now an ex-Scientologist after 30 years in the organisation, and he was one of those ordered to Lower Manhattan on the morning of September the 11th.
Scientologists believe that they have the only answers to problems of the mind and the spirit and that sort of thing, and that no one else does, including other religions. They will say that they accept other religions, but in reality they think only Scientologists have the answers. And starting way back in the 50s, L. Ron Hubbard began attacking psychiatry, and there's been sort of a battle going on ever since then. They've stated several times they want to destroy psychiatry. So at ground zero then, they wanted to keep psychiatrists or other forms of counseling out of the activities there.
And alarmingly, he also told 5 Live that he wasn't only told to keep medically trained counsellors away.
I know there was like organized buses coming up from Florida, where there's a large Scientology center, lots from California and from all around. So it ended up that there were hundreds going down there, probably every day. The idea was to get as many people as possible in yellow t-shirts down at ground zero, because the yellow t-shirts are very visible, just sort of to make an impact that way. And there's always a hope that someone who gets involved will then continue with Scientology.
We're going to bring a guest in at this stage. Dr. Max Pemberton is here. He's a psychiatric doctor and journalist who last year also went undercover to report on the organisation. Max, good morning to you. Bruce Hines explained there how, as a volunteer minister, he took advantage of the situation to keep out trained psychiatric helpers, as he put it. But does it become more sinister when he says that they use the disaster to recruit and actually convert people caught up in them?
Yes, it does. People directly after such an awful event are in shock. They're incredibly vulnerable. It seems to me very sinister that Scientology appears to be specifically targeting those individuals in society who are vulnerable, whether this is because they've just survived a traumatic event or because they have long-standing mental health problems. I feel very uneasy at the idea that Scientology appears to be taking advantage of catastrophes by using them as recruitment venues. Immediately after an event such as the July the 7th bombings, people need support, information and follow-up with trained professionals. The first few days after such an event are vital if the person isn't to experience long-term psychological problems.
Because there's a situation there that was alluded to whereby Scientologists are treating trauma victims. Now, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm very disturbed to hear that Scientologists are treating trauma victims when they actually don't even believe in post-traumatic stress disorder. Of course, we psychiatrists aren't infallible, and in particular, psychiatric medication shouldn't be seen as a panacea to all forms of mental illness. But it is a medically recognised treatment which is subject to rigorous peer review. And if Scientologists advocate getting rid of psychiatric treatment for trauma victims, I'd like to know what they're going to offer instead.
Max, we will talk more as the report progresses. Also with us is Ian Howarth, who's from the Cult Information Centre and joins us here on the riverbank. Ian, good morning. Thank you for coming along.
Good morning.
We should stress straight away, we are not talking about a cult here.